welcome all of you here this evening. We've got a program. We want to get it started on time, so you can just go ahead and enjoy your refreshments and so forth here. Suzanne and I came to Glencoe in 1977 and have been here since that time. We added the funeral home in Norwood and the funeral home in Wester Prairie to Glencoe in 1993. So we added those places then. We have 2 adult children who are both living in the state of New Mexico. And up here with me tonight is Brenda and Robert and David and Sherry. And they'll all be, most of them will be a part of the program here. So,
okay.
You want to say anything?
Sure. I'm Brenda Hornick, and I've been a pre-planner, funeral pre-planner since 1998. Met with thousands of families. Newly married last month. I have 2 grown children, 5 grandkids.
I'm one of the directors here with the McBride Chapels. I've been a funeral director for about 4 years and up in this part of the world for a year. So I live in Norwood, Young America with my wife and 2 kids, 5 and 2.5. And I work here every day with Sherry and Gail.
And I'm Sherry Stamps. I'm a director here as well. And Dave and I went to mortuary school together down at the U, so we know each other. And then about that time he hired me, so I've been around here 4 or 5 years. And we live in Glencoe, my husband and I, and this is one of my kids. And I have another little boy at home as well. And yeah, I work with Dave and Gail too.
Gail?
I work in the office here and I'm from Wester Prairie.
My name is Robert Hantge. I've been a funeral director for about 22 years, working with Bruce and Susan and the rest of the team here for the last 1.5 years. Welcome to the program that we have for you tonight. Feel free to keep eating. We brought you here. We wanted to feed you, so please keep eating. If you need something, feel free to get up and help yourself to some more refreshments. We started doing these seminars about 12, 14 years ago. And like many life's decisions, the more planning, the more research we do ahead of time, the better decisions that we make. And I went into funeral service because I wanted to help people. So hence the reason for the seminar tonight. We all found that we can better help people the more research and information that they have ahead of time. So thank you for being here this evening. I also have children. I have 4 boys, and my youngest is almost 3 years old. So they are a lot of fun. We have a great program for you tonight. Great speakers that will give you a lot of information. Feel free to ask questions at the end. These are people that I would also seek advice from if I was looking for information. So please use these people. They've come here. They've donated their time to be here and be a part of this program to help you. So please use them. So we're going to get started here, Brenda.
Thank you, Robert. Welcome, everybody. We're glad we had such a good turnout tonight. And we're going to hold questions till the end. When all the speakers are done, you have a note sheet in your folder. So if you think of a question, please write it down because we want to answer all your questions. We don't want to have anybody leave here with any doubt or question or what was the answer to that. So tonight we have a panel of experts in their field, and we hope that you find it very interesting. And so we're going to get started right away because we don't want you to be here till 10 o'clock tonight. You probably don't either. So we're going to start with a very interesting topic, medical assistance. Some of you have probably been involved with that or have been exposed to that, or maybe not. So Pat Zaleski is going to come up and talk about that topic and answer a lot of your questions and maybe raise a lot more questions for you. Pat?
Okay. Thanks, Brenda. Well, good evening, everybody. Brenda, a lot of them did fill out that pre-programmed survey, so if you maybe want to pass that to the ends of the table, Brenda will pick those up. If you didn't fill it out, that's okay, don't worry about it. They've asked me to do just a couple housekeeping things before I get started, and one of them Brenda already mentioned. We're going to try and get done tonight in about 90 minutes. We're going to just kind of zip through things. You can help us do that if you wouldn't mind holding all your questions until the end of the program rather than asking them of the speaker. And then that way too, if any of you would have to leave early, you get a chance to hear everybody, and we'll make sure we got a little timer up here, so if you'll hear beep once in a while, that's just to keep us on track. Secondly, we'd like to ask everyone if you would turn your cell phones off or put them on quiet so we don't get interrupted as we go along. And then lastly, as Robert mentioned, we're not going to take a formal break tonight. So if you want to get another cookie, get another cup of coffee or something, just feel free to get up and do that in between speakers. We'll keep it real casual as we go ahead this evening. So my name is Pat. I live down by in a little town outside Cleveland, Minnesota. My office is in Mankato. And they've asked me to come up tonight and share some information with you about the Medicaid program, which I'll go through and get done for you. Did they tell you with dinner there's a test? Well, there's always a catch. We're going to take a little test. I'll share my funeral plan with you, and then I'll jump into the meat and potatoes of what they've asked me to go through this evening. And then when you hear me say, "Can I get $1?" you'll know I'm just about finished, and you'll all be ready to give me $1 and get me to shut up about that time. So as we move ahead, I'd like to let everybody know it's my job to try and get you as depressed as I possibly can tonight. All right? I'm going to share a lot of problems. That's why they have me going first in the program, because the people that come after me are ones that have solutions to many of these problems that I'm going to raise. And I'll check back with you later here this evening to see if I did a good job depressing you. The test is pretty easy. It's more for me than it is for you. Kind of helps me understand what you're interested in hearing about, what I should talk about this evening. And the first question I like to ask everybody is, raise your hand if you're going to live in the nursing home. No takers for that one, all right? Okay. Second question on the test, raise your hand if you think there's a chance the guy sitting next to you might go to the nursing home someday. It's where the wives' hands go flying up in the air. And I don't want to make light of that. That's no fun for us if that happens. Thank goodness we have those facilities in our neighborhoods to take care of us and provide the level of care they do. But yeah, we always seem to think it's going to be the other guy. It's not going to be us. And what each of us hope to do tonight with our short time is give you some information, maybe give you some education in the hopes that if something bad should happen to you or someone in your family, it might make it a little bit easier based on what you heard here tonight. Or maybe you can do something in advance to prevent some of those things from taking place. So my funeral plan is pretty straightforward. It has 4 parts to it. I've got it all written out on file. And the way it works is I'm not going to die till I'm really old. It's going to be in a mansion in Florida with a whole bunch of money in the bank, and my kids never disagree with anything I tell them to do. Okay? That's the plan. A lot of us have a plan kind of like that. We just tend to think, well, everything's going to work out okay. If that happens to me, I can ignore all the things I'm going to talk about for the next 10 minutes. Because if I have enough money to pay my own way for the rest of my life, who gets to be in charge of making the decisions? I do, right? Because I'm paying the bill. But what could happen to me instead is something that happens to people in Minnesota every single day. I could have some kind of an accident or an illness. I could need to enter some kind of a long-term care facility, and at $5,000 or sometimes even $6,000 a month, it's not going to take real long before my wife and I start to see our assets dwindle down. And at that point, she's going to have to go to the county to see if she can get some help. Well, she's going to hear some good news. She's going to be told, yes, there is a program that will pay for Pat's medical bills and make sure you have some money so you're not destitute as well. The bad news that she's going to hear is if she wants to enroll me in this program, she's going to have to follow all of their rules. They're not going to change them. They're not going to make an exception for us just because I'm a nice guy or I lived in town all of my life. And the first thing that's going to happen is they're going to give my wife a booklet. It's about 43 pages long. She's going to have to take that home, fill it out, tell the county about everything that we own and what we've done with our money for the last 5 years, okay? That 5 years is called the look-back period. They're gonna look back to make sure we didn't just give our money to the kids and now we're going to the taxpayers and saying, hey, pay our bills for us. So what is this program? First of all, Medicaid is a federal program. In Minnesota, it's administered by each county. So wherever we live, we go to the courthouse there to find out more information. In Minnesota, we call it medical assistance. Every state has their own name for the program. The rules are very strict. They're changed on us from time to time. They're difficult to understand in many circumstances. They're different for single people than they are for married people, and I'll share a little bit of that with you as we move ahead here today. Now, I've never met any of you before. So if last night I would have called you on the phone, you picked up the phone, first thing I say to you is, how do I get to Glencoe? What are you going to say to me at that point in time?
Where are you at?
Where are you at? She gets another cookie, Brenda. This is right. Where are you coming from, all right? Medical assistance is the same thing. Where we're coming from is going to determine what rules apply to us. If I am single, I live in an apartment, and I don't own a car, there's one set of rules for me. If I'm married, I own a home, maybe a couple cars and a cabin or something, there's a different set of rules for that situation. So what happened to my uncle or to your neighbor may not be what happens to us. We're all different. And just as important as where we're coming from is where do we want to end up. I am not up here tonight to say, here's a bunch of tricks to hide your money and go on the county. Okay, that's not the purpose of my presentation. But at the same time, I like to let people know it's a little bit like doing our taxes. If you understand how the rules work, you get to keep a little more of your money in your pocket. But that is a personal choice that everybody needs to make. There's no right or wrong. It's whatever works out best for you. So my wife takes that book home, she works on it, she gets it all filled out, brings it back into the folks at the county, and they're going to look at everything we own and they're going to put them into categories. Okay? Almost everything is going to be what they call an available asset. If it's available, that means my wife and I need to use that up first before we get help from the county. Okay? We have to do what they call a spend down. So we have to use up our money first, then we start going on the county's money at that point in time. Now, years ago when I gave this presentation, my next screen used to have a big list of non-available and excluded assets, things we could keep. There just are not many of those left anymore. And one of the reasons why is because about 5 years ago, the federal government made 3 big changes to Medicaid. I already mentioned the first change to you. It used to be a 3-year look back when we made a gift. It is now a 5-year look back. The old rules said even in that 3-year look back, we could still give away a few $1,000s every month. The new rules say no gifts in those 5 years look back period. We cannot give anything away. And if we do give anything away, there's a period of time where we're not eligible for Medicaid. And what I'll do is I'll take you through a quick example using my family. We have 4 children. So let's say one year we gave a gift to each of those kids of $10,000 apiece or $40,000. Well, 2 years after we do that, I enter a long-term care facility. Now my wife and I, we have some assets, so we pay for 2 years of care on our own before she goes in to apply for medical assistance. Well, one of the questions in that booklet says, have you given anything away? She says, yep, we gave the kids $40,000 4 years ago. The county says, go get it back. Think any likelihood of that happening? Not if you got kids like mine, that's not going to happen. So what happens in a situation like that where we make a gift and we can't get it back? And this doesn't even have to be to our kids. It could be to the Red Cross, it could be to our church, it could be wherever we gave that money away to. Well, there's a formula, and the county runs that formula, and they say because I gave away $40,000, I'm not eligible for Medicaid for 8 months. But under the new rules, it's 8 months from today after I'm out of money and can't afford to pay for my care. And the county isn't going to pay for it either. So who's going to end up paying the people that are taking care of me? Well, the government understands that these kinds of things can happen, so they have a waiver form. And they say in these circumstances, you sign this waiver form, even though you gave away that money, we'll still put you on Medicaid. Well, when I signed that form, I just gave the state the right to go after my kids to get that $40,000. And they're going to get it, one way or another. At this point, I always like to let everybody know, though, the people who work at the county are not the bad guys. Okay? They're there to help us. But if they want to keep their job, they have to do the same thing we have to do, right? You got to do what your boss tells you to do. But they're a wonderful resource. Don't be afraid of them. Don't feel like you got to hide anything from them. Go ahead and work with them. But let's get into a couple specifics here. If I'm single, widowed, or divorced, what do I have to spend down to before I'm eligible for Medicaid? Well, what I like to do is kind of flip that coin over and I go, what do I get to keep? I get to keep $3,000 in assets. I get to keep my personal property. No one can take away my wedding ring or my photo album. Those things are mine. They belong to me. I get to keep money to pay for my funeral, but only if I have set it up properly through the funeral home I intend to use. Must involve a funeral home. And I get this old slide here. I get to keep $89 a month out of my Social Security check. Once this is all I have left in the world, and I haven't given anything away for 5 years, I would be eligible for medical assistance. Are there any veterans in the room at all? Any veterans here today?
Yeah.
You guys get to keep $91 a month. So you get that extra $2 every month there. You buy a lottery ticket with it or something. Here's something you might want to pay attention to in case you know someone who's already in that 5-year look-back period. This is one of the few remaining things that we can still do to protect some assets. And again, I'll use my children. With 4 of them, if they were all married, that would be 8 people. My wife and I could take about $10,000 apiece, or $80,000, put it into burial trusts for each of our children and their spouses, instead of spending that money on our medical care. So now that money's going to stay in my family. It will benefit my grandchildren one day. It's not really going to help my kids, but it is something that's there. So that is one of the few things that we can do to protect some assets if we're in that situation. And what I like about it is now that I bought all the kids a casket, I don't need to go Christmas shopping this year. So I've taken that care. How about for married people? Doesn't matter who owns the asset. Everything we own goes into the pot. I'm the one who's sick. My wife has an IRA with only her name on it. It still is an includable asset for a spend down. Same thing with our wills. What is in our will has nothing to do with medical assistance. My will might say, upon my death, this annuity goes to, or rather that's a bad example, this bank account goes to my church. Well, if I've had to spend that bank account in order to qualify for medical assistance, it's not going to be there to give to my church anymore. So wills and prenuptial agreements have no bearing with medical assistance. All right, I'm in the nursing home. I have my $3,000 in my funeral money. What does my wife get to keep? Again, old slide, I apologize. She gets to keep somewhere between $31,000 and $110,000. She does not necessarily get to keep half. That's a common misconception. She gets to keep a certain amount of income. The county wants to make sure she has enough to live on. If she doesn't have enough income, they'll take some of my income and put that over to her. Likewise, she gets to keep all the personal property, furnishings in her home, money for her funeral, 1 automobile, and she gets to keep our home. That's another myth. Nobody can kick my wife out of the house. That's her house. She can live there as long as she wants to. Now, when she dies, the county can come back against her estate and claim any money that they paid for me. But during her lifetime, this is hers. She gets to keep and use this. So what's an available asset? Pretty much everything. Our IRAs, our 401ks, bank accounts, assets in revocable living trusts, money markets, stocks and bonds. This next screen has some available assets that people often forget about when they're doing their planning. Cabins or second homes. Okay, my wife gets to keep 1 homestead. If we have a cabin somewhere, that is an available asset. Money in our life insurance policies. This one is often trips people up. I get to keep $3,000 for if I want medical assistance. If my life insurance policy has $10,000 of cash value, I'm going to have to cash that policy in because I'm $7,000 over the limit. And now it's not going to be there to pay for my funeral. So if you do have a small life insurance policy, I would almost urge you, bring that policy into the funeral home ahead of time. Let them look it over. If they have enough time, they can normally help you protect those dollars. If they don't, they can't. They're going to look at our toys, our boats, our motorcycles, RVs, and they're in business and our farm assets as well. So it's a pretty wide net. Now, every once in a while, I'll give this presentation, and a person will say to me, well, Pat, we're just not going to tell them we have it. Okay? That's not a good idea, all right? We got Grandpa in the nursing home. We don't need Grandma in the slammer for welfare fraud. Doesn't make for a real fun Thanksgiving, all right? You can't get in trouble for doing anything, but you can get in trouble if you try and hide what you did. Okay, so again, be open, full disclosure if you're applying for medical assistance. As I finish things up here this evening, here is what I would like you to remember about what I went through. Kind of boils it all down into one line. If I wanted to, could I get $1? Okay? Ask yourself this question about any asset you own. Could you turn it into a dollar bill somehow? Could you sell your boat? Could you cash in your life insurance? No? Yes, you could, because it belongs to you. So if the answer is yes, the county has to say, go get that dollar, spend it down to $3,000, and come back and see us when that's all you have left. Now I can tell by looking at you, I did a good job of getting you all depressed tonight, all right? Let me cheer you up quick before I turn you over to the next speaker. I don't want to leave you with any indigestion or anything. I know you're eating. I cannot be sincere enough when I tell you, do not be fearful of the things I went through here tonight, all right? Don't go home and call up the grandkids and say, no more birthday presents, because Grandpa might go in the nursing home someday, okay? We're talking about your money that you worked hard for, and you saved it and you invested it. I cannot encourage you enough to enjoy it, okay? Spend it on what you want to spend it on. You can't get in trouble for anything like that. There's no penalty or periods like that. But at the same time, 5 years is a long time. If we did this same program 5 years from now, I guarantee you one of us in this room would be dealing with something like this. Okay? So if it's important to us to protect some assets, either for our church, our kids, or anything that's near and dear to us, we want to keep the cabin in the family, whatever it might be, now is the time to take a look at these issues while we've got the gift of time and we can get some things set up correctly and make sure they're done properly. So thank you very much for having me in tonight. Thank you to everybody at the funeral home for putting this on. I really appreciate it. And we're going to turn it over now to Michael Long, and he'll get you all cheered up. Thank you. Yeah, no questions, but applause is fine. You can clap all you want. So that. Well, I got them all depressed again for you, Mike. So it's all up to you now.
Good evening. How are you? Sort of a nice night out there. At least it's not raining. As you can see, there's no such thing as a free meal. They gave you the food, but now you have to sit and listen to us talk. So hopefully that's not all bad. You'll pick up something here. My name is Mike Long, as it says on the board there. I'm an attorney here in Glencoe. I've been in Glencoe now for 32 years, so pretty much not my entire legal career, but certainly most of it's been right here in Glencoe. I live in Glencoe. And I work in the areas of estate planning, which is why they asked me to be one of the speakers here, and also real estate and probate. And Pat kind of talked about what happens, at the end, as far as the funeral process, and if you need medical assistance and how those rules work. My focus is a little bit earlier than that. What are some of the things you should have in place before you go into the nursing home, when we're more our age and hopefully healthy and not had a nursing home yet? What are some of the planning tips that you should be doing? And I call it my estate planning toolbox. Right? All of us have a toolbox at home, and there are some tools you definitely have to have in there, and some tools you might think about and you might buy or you might not buy. And so not every toolbox has a router in it. Every toolbox has a screwdriver and hammer and a crescent wrench. So I'm going to just give you a few tools, a couple that I think are absolutely necessary, and then others that just are tools that you should think about and see if they fit your situation. And the main reason that I'm glad I get invited to these seminars is the one thing I really stress is a power of attorney. That's tool number one. And how many here, raise your hands, have a power of attorney? Okay, that's good. At least half, maybe a little bit more than half. How many have used a power of attorney for their folks or another family member, where they've been the agent for their folks? Okay, good. It may be, I don't keep track of, about the single most common document that I prepare is a power of attorney, because I just think as we get older, when you're 20 you don't need it, but as we get older, the you know, I have clients in the 40s, 50s, 60s, certainly on up. So one thing you should have. It's a very simple document. It's a standard form right out of the Minnesota state statutes. Very easy to prepare. And what a power of attorney is usually you and your spouse. You give your spouse the authority to handle things if you're not in condition to do that. For a stroke or in a car accident and you're unconscious in a coma, should you have Alzheimer's and dementia develop, if you've given your spouse the power of attorney, then he or she can take care of the business things that have to be taken care of. And I stress it even more as we get older, and once our children are old enough to also be on the power of attorney, I like to add them. We're not going to do it when they're 16, but when they're 30, 35, because often if you're a married couple, you and your wife are vacationing together, traveling together, and if there's a common accident or an accident and one spouse was killed and the other was, again, unconscious in a coma, then we'd have one of the children already on the power of attorney. And they could then step in and do all the things that the power of attorney can do. On the form, if you ever look at it, it's got about 13, 14 different categories that you can give the power of attorney authority to do. Real estate, banking, insurance, if there's litigation, you can do litigation. So as we get older, it's just the number one document that you should have. I had a thought and I lost it again. Another senior moment right there. It'll come back to me. What happens if you don't have a power of attorney? All right? If you don't, with spouses, most of the things, if one spouse is in the hospital or something, the other spouse can do. Okay? So if you're married, pretty much the spouse can step in and take care of things. In my example again, if one spouse is killed and the other is unconscious or had a stroke, then it doesn't work that way. The law doesn't let the children just step in and take care of it. If the children don't have a power of attorney, they have to hire an attorney, go into court. We petition for a guardianship or conservatorship. There's a hearing. The person that was called the ward has a right to an attorney. They have a right to contest it. And sometimes we get people with very serious Alzheimer's. And if you know with Alzheimer's dementia, their normal personality was a very calm, cool person, but sometimes with dementia they can get very angry and aggressive, and I've had some of these. And so even it's the best thing for them, they'll go into court and they'll get an attorney and they'll fight it and take it to a jury trial, and it takes out months and years and thousands of dollars to get it resolved. Whereas if they just would have had a power of attorney, that wouldn't be necessary. So tool number one I really stress is a power of attorney. One thing that came up this morning that I didn't mention, that I think is very worth mentioning, is a power of attorney does end at death. If you're named power of attorney for your parent dies, the power of attorney ends at that moment. It does not carry on after death. After death, then, you have to see if there's going to be a probate, and a personal representative has to be appointed. Often there's a gap after death and before you can get into court and get appointed, where nobody has authority to do anything, and that's just the way the system is. So power of attorney is very, very useful while you're living. Once the person passes away, the power of attorney automatically, by state law, ends. Okay, that's tool number one. I like to joke, I don't know if I'll really do it, but there will be a test after this, when all the speakers are done today. And to make it easy for you, the answer to the test is power of attorney. What's the one document I think we all need, okay? So, all right, the other document that I have all my clients when they come in, often they come in to talk about something else, a will or a trust or medical assistance planning like Pat was talking about. But nobody ever leaves without I doing a power of attorney for them, and the other one is a healthcare directive. Healthcare directives have been around in Minnesota for quite a few years. I didn't ever use them much. I knew they were there, but I didn't bring them out. I always had my clients do a power of attorney. But the healthcare directive, Minnesota was pretty good. The medical profession is pretty good. If the spouse tells the doctor what they want, the doctor would pretty much rely on that. But then the Terry Shriver case, remember the Terry Shriver case in Florida? Husband and wife, the wife was in a car accident. badly injured, was brain dead. Her husband waited years to see if anything could happen, if she'd ever improve, and she didn't. And finally the doctors came to the husband and said, you know, she's just in a vegetative state, nothing's ever going to improve here. She's just being kept alive because some machine was pumping her lungs. Now, do you want her to live like this? And he said no, she would not want to live this way, so he gave the authority to the doctors to turn off the machines. And Florida law in many ways is not like Minnesota, but this is one area where Minnesota and Florida law were the same. And that is under Florida law, the spouse can make that decision, okay, without a writing. And so the husband said, yes, doctor, I give you the authority to turn off the machines now, that's enough. And then Terry's mother, or parents got involved, and they got politics involved, and they got religion involved. And it went on for about 12 years of litigation. About a dozen times to the Florida Supreme Court, twice to the U.S. Supreme Court, and it was all done. What the Florida Supreme Court ruled was the spouse makes that decision, right back to step number one. But what we all learned from that is if Mr. Schreiber had had a written document from his wife, a healthcare directive, also called a living will, it's the same thing, just has different names. If he would have had a healthcare directive, he would have given that to the judge at the very first hearing, and that would be the end of it. If his spouse, if Terry Schreiber had done it, a written document, the judge would have accepted that. There would have been no litigation for those 12 years. So we all learned because of that, and I certainly learned because I was not using them very frequently, that that's tool number 2 you should have in your toolbox, is a healthcare directive. It's a mini power of attorney. It just says I give this person the right to make that decision. And then again, like the power of attorney, I like to have, there's a place on the form that I use. And there's a number of forms. You can go on the internet. There's, unlike the power of attorney, is a pretty standard Minnesota form. The healthcare directive, there's a number. Probably look at ARP has a form. There's another one called 7 Wishes. That's a good form. There's different ones out there if you just search on the internet. The form I use, you can also have a child or a second person. It doesn't have to be a child. It could be a brother or sister. So if your spouse was killed, you have a second person right on the form that then has that authority to make that decision to turn off the machines. Again, it's usually a child. Once you go outside the close family, it's kind of wondered, do I really want my brother to have authority to turn off the machines? The brother I used to get in fights with all the time as a kid. I don't know what I want to give him that authority to turn off the machine on me. But it's there. There's always place for an alternative if you want one. So those are the 2 tools that I think you should definitely have. The third tool is I put again under the category that is something you should think about. It doesn't fit for everybody, and Pat mentioned that briefly, is long-term care insurance. It's something you should look at, you should consider, see if it fits your situation. It's a very good tool when clients come in and we're doing their estate planning, and I see that they have long-term care insurance. I know I've got a lot more flexibility in dealing with their planning because they've got the money set aside through that policy to pay for long-term care for 3, 5 years, whatever it takes. So if we decide to do some gifting, which is a common estate planning tool, get the house to the kids. As Pat talked about, there's a 5-year look back now. We all have to live with the 5-year look back. If you got long-term care insurance, then I know it's likely that we have enough money to get us by the 5 years so that we won't have to fight the county with that 3 years from now or something. So it's a tool. It's just, I wish it was less expensive. If it was less expensive, a lot more people would use it. But it is expensive, but it's a very good tool if you have it. The next thing I like to do is not, and some of my things are hard to put into a concrete form, but I have it just on the heading of joint tenancy for my own notes. And that is when you're looking at your estate planning, you need to consider, how do I own my property? If we're a married couple, do we have everything in joint tenants? If we do, is that the right way to own it? Or a lot of times one person will buy a farm just in the husband's name and they've been married for 40 years and maybe it's time to put the wife's name on that. And the reason for that, if it's just in one name alone and you die, it'll have to go through probate. And that's what probate is. I often get the question, a lot of people think if I have a will, it won't have to go through probate because my will says it's going to go to my wife. A will does not avoid probate. how you avoid probate is having at least 2 names on everything. So if the farmer's just in the husband's name, and I wanted to, you know, my wife, you know, been with me all these years, and then we should put the wife's name on as joint tenants. So that's a general rule. Most married couples should have their property in joint tenants, but there's always exceptions to everything. And once your estate, if it starts getting to $1 million and more, for tax reasons, you may own it in joint tenants now and come in to talk to me, and I'll be telling you, let's split it up, because we need to set up your wills or your trust in an appropriate manner. As you know, you can pass $5 million on, each of us can, tax-free on the federal tax, but only $1 million tax-free, each of us, on estate tax. So sometimes if we're doing planning, I want to make sure I get use of both the husband's $1 million worth of state credits, and I want to make sure I get the wife's $1 million worth of state credits. I'm going to break up their assets and take them out of joint tenancy, even though, like I said, starting out, joint tenancy is where you're kind of the default, the way most people should have it. But if your estate gets too larger, we're going to break it up and put in tenants in common, or put these 40 acres in one name and this 40 acres in another name. But we're going to break that up. But that's something at least you should be considering. It's kind of maybe a little complicated to go over tonight, but that's something that your estate planner, your attorney, when he's talking to you, is going to take a look at. How should you own for your property? Should you own it jointly so that there's no probate at the first step, or should we break it up? And then we force a probate, because now part of it's in one name alone. But we force that probate so that we can make use of the tax rules. Okay? So that's not one handy tool, but that's something that we look at. Should it be in joint tenancy or should it not be in joint tenancy? All right. The next thing is wills and trusts, and there's no way I can touch on that answer, in the few minutes that I have. But that's something, the tool that you're going to have to look at when you're doing your estate planning. Should you have a will? And the answer pretty much is for everybody, yes, should have a will. But some people go the next step, and trusts are very popular these days. So you may have a will, but you may decide, I want to put it into a trust. The main advantage of a trust is it will not have to go through the probate process. If you own your property and you have a will and you die, it gets in your name alone and you die, it'll have to go through probate, and then your will gets given to the judge, and the judge makes his decision based on the will. But if you have it in a trust, then it won't have to go through the probate process, because the trust document tells us where it's going to go. We don't need a judge to tell us where it's going to go, because it's all built into the trust. At my death, the income goes to my wife, and at her death, it goes to our kids. Very simple trust like that. So again, it's kind of more of an idea than a tool, but it's something when you're doing your estate planning that you will certainly take a look at. Should I have a will? Should I have a trust? Am I concerned with probate? One thing about trusts I want to point out, I get it all the time. People think if I put it into a trust that the county can't take it for medical assistance. If my spouse has to go on long-term care and I've got it in a trust, the county can't take it. That's not correct. If you did the trust before 2003, when Minnesota changed a lot of the laws, you might be okay. But any trust done after 2003, the county can go after the assets. Okay. And the last thing, I'm out of time. I'll hit the red button here. One other tool, and again, Pat touched on this a little bit. Gifting is still a good estate planning tool. Transferring your assets out of your name into the kids' names, often with what's called a life estate, so you still have the use of the property and the income for as long as you live. Still very common planning. A lot of people, after Minnesota changed their rules in 2003 and the federal rules changed in 2006, would come up to me and say, well, I guess we can't do any gifting anymore. You certainly can, and I still do gifting all the time. We just got to get by the 5 years. Instead of it used to be 3 years, now you got to get by 5 years. Okay? So still a good tool. All right? All I'm trying to do today is, again, we don't have time, is these are just some things to keep in mind when you go in to talk to your financial planner or your attorney. These are some of the things that are going to come out in the discussion, and by listening to this, hopefully you've had a few ideas ahead of time what you might be looking at. I'll be around like everybody else after the last speaker, So if you have questions, feel free to ask me then. Okay? Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Jim Lauer. I'm the Veteran Service Officer for McLeod County. Got counterparts in all 87 counties of Minnesota, so if you're not from McLeod, you've got somebody just like me in your home county to help you. We're going to talk a little bit about veterans benefits. There are benefits to assist veterans as well as their family members with death and burial benefits. How many veterans or spouses of veterans do we have here with us tonight? Okay. How many have a relative that's a veteran or in the service? And how many has an acquaintance that they have coffee with, play cards with, drink a beer with that's a veteran? Okay, good. You're going to be able to stump them because a lot of times there are misconceptions about what kinds of death and burial benefits veterans have. You have one set of veteran that tells his spouse and his family, don't worry about it, I was in the service, it's all taken care of. The government will take care of it all. Not a true statement. That is true if you're in the service and you die while you're on active duty. But we're talking about veterans, so the service is done. The other common misconception is, I served during peacetime, I didn't go to war, I don't have any benefits. Or, I applied to the VA once for health care and was denied, I don't have any benefits. Not true. Okay. What we're going to talk about quickly is who is a veteran for these benefits purposes, what are burial benefits, what are death benefits that veterans might be entitled to, and most importantly, how do we apply for them? Who's a veteran? Number of different things we look at. Branch of service, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, active duty, Guard and Reserve. Period of service. Was it wartime? Was it peacetime? Length of service. Are we talking one tour? Or are we talking about an entire career with retirement benefits? Characterization of service. That's where you hear about an honorable discharge. There's a whole string of different types of discharges. Basically, the only way a veteran will disenroll himself from death and burial benefits is to have a dishonorable discharge. Documentation of that service. We'll talk about how important that is at the end. What are burial benefits? And we'll kind of go who's entitled as we go through that. The most common burial benefit that pretty much all veterans, regardless of period of service, branch of service, component of service, is the presentation of that American flag to the immediate next of kin. Whether it's folded, whether it's over the casket, that's probably the common denominator that everybody is entitled to. Military honors. That goes everything from somebody present to present that flag to an honor guard to a firing detail. It's not a firing squad. It's a firing detail. Okay. It's not a 21-gun salute. It's a 3-volley salute. Very often you'll see the detail as being traditionally 7 people. Technically it's 4 to 11, but 7 times 3 people think 21 guns. No, it's a salute volley. Taps being played. And if you're being buried at Arlington National Cemetery, like you've seen presidents buried and other people, a caisson with a riderless horse and a military band. Okay, we don't see a lot of that here in McLeod County. But when we talk about those military honors, if you served on active duty, you're actually entitled to have a member of that branch of service present at your funeral. That's the person who is able to present that flag. Very often here, our local veterans organizations help out and provide that. But a lot of people assume that's the only people that do that, and that's not correct. They can be augmented with the branch of service. So if you were a Marine and you're really proud about being a Marine, you can have a Marine at your funeral. And he'll be the one that presents that flag to your next of kin. A presidential certificate. This is a certificate, comes from the White House to the next of kin that's designated to one last time thank the family for that veteran service. It's from the sitting president at the time of death. Not your favorite president, not the president that was in the service when you were on active duty, but the current sitting president. So if you've got a certain political persuasion, you need to make sure you live long enough for that kind of president to be in the White House. You can get multiples of these. People get them and they go, oh, that's really nice. I'd like to have each of my children have one. Yes, all they have to do is ask, and we can get them for each of them. And the Bronze Star flag holders we see in the cemeteries that hold the flags, originally they were provided by veterans organizations. They are provided by the state of Minnesota. These are benefits that pretty much every veteran that we can conceivably talk about is entitled to. So there are entitlements that they all have. There's additional requirements for the following items. A government-provided marker or headstone. Okay? This program started in the Civil War when a lot of veterans' graves were going unmarked. And so that came aboard at that point in time. Until the 90s, you were not entitled to that marker unless you had an unmarked grave. So if you had your own stone or a family stone, you couldn't get a government marker. That changed in 91. So now you're entitled to this in addition to a private stone. I've got a brochure in the back that talks about all the options. It can be an upright stone, it can be a flat stone, marble or granite. It can be a bronze, flat bronze marker, which is very common in this area. I think partly because people think it's the only option, and it's not. And there's a brand new option if you really have that nice big stone that you want to share with your spouse. There's a small medallion that can be affixed to that stone permanently that will designate this as a veteran's resting place. And that information is back there where you can look at it, you can make your choices, you can put it in the pre-planning packet that Brenda's going to talk to you about, and you don't have to worry about the choices later on. If you're entitled to that marker, you're also entitled to be buried at either the national or the state cemetery. Okay? In both of these cases, it required active duty service until the mid-80s. After that, if you were discharged after 1981, it requires 24 months of active duty service. Unless you're a guardsman and reservist who was mobilized like we've had right around here, they get called to active duty for 1 to 2 years. They've served the period they were called, they've been released, they're entitled to those markers and stones, they're entitled to be buried at a national cemetery. If a guardsman and a reservist was not mobilized anytime during their career, but served long enough to qualify for retirement benefits, they're entitled to burial at a national cemetery and or a government marker. 3 kinds of allowances to help with funeral costs. If you are in receipt of service-connected disability compensation because you were injured while you were in the service, or you're a veteran that's receiving pension benefits, that's something that's tied to wartime service and basically having more medical costs than you have income. These 3 allowances can help with moving your remains from where you pass away to the national cemetery. The burial allowance can be applied to any costs that a funeral director is asking you to pay. And the plot allowance goes to either buying a grave, or it can be used for the opening and closing fees that a cemetery charges for that. If you elect to go to a national or state veteran cemetery, where that cost is free, the plot allowance obviously doesn't apply. It doesn't matter if you've already got the funeral pre-planned, prepaid. Whoever made the arrangements once the funeral is done is entitled to recoup those allowances. Those are burial benefits. We're going to talk quickly about death benefits. These are some things that the survivors should be aware of. Did the veteran have a government life insurance policy in effect? Very often when people left the service, they had a government life insurance policy, and they've either kept paying very small premiums over the years, or they converted it to a paid-up policy and have totally forgotten about it. If they were drawing some of those other benefits that we talked about at the time of death, the surviving spouse is entitled to the last month's equivalent of those benefits, as long as he or she asks for it. Part of our job is to make sure you ask for it. If the death of that veteran is related to his service-connected disability, let's say he had a heart condition when he was in service, if he served in Vietnam and has diabetes, if those conditions show up on his death certificate, which they very often do, that death is deemed to be a service-connected death, and there's a whole other type of tax-free compensation for that surviving spouse. Very similar to what the spouses of soldiers, sailors, and airmen who die on active duty receive. And then the last is if that veteran had wartime service, there's something we call a death pension. In the past, it was commonly called a widow's pension. All right, and it's to make sure that she doesn't fall below a certain standard of living. Where we usually see it going into effect is when that surviving spouse needs to go into long-term care, because very often the cost of that long-term care very quickly eats up whatever resources you have remaining, because your spouse has already died, so everything has been in your names. Most importantly, how do we apply? We need to make sure we have your service discharge papers. Not that nice little certificate that says honorable discharge on it that should be in a frame and hanging on a wall. That's called a discharge certificate. A discharge shows when you entered the service, when you left the service, the places of both of those events, your date of birth, your place of birth, the highest rank held, all of those kinds of items. That document may be sitting in your sock drawer. It may be in that box in the attic that nobody ever goes into but you. It should be with your important papers or on file at the local county veteran service office. So we can produce it and help do the paperwork anytime it needs to be done. If you put a pre-planning packet together, put a copy of that discharge in that packet. It makes things go a heck of a lot smoother. But you need to find that document. Because if you don't have it when you pass away, and I can't locate it in our county or an adjacent county, I have to go to the federal government to get a copy of that. Okay? If you pass away on a Friday, your funeral's going to be on a Monday or Tuesday, we are not going to get that discharge in time to make sure we have your military veterans benefits in time for the funeral. So you want to find that document now. Include it in the pre-planning. Make sure your family knows where it is. You can give it to the funeral director, or you can record it in our offices and we'll take care of the paperwork for you. The whole purpose of the county veteran service offices, which there's no charge for any of our benefits, is to help you, your families, to apply for the entitlements you earned by your active duty service, your service in the Guard and Reserve. And that's what we're here to do. So if you have any questions about it, feel free to give us a call. Now, I'm not going to be able to stay tonight. My youngest daughter has her last choir concert before she graduates, so I'm off to that. But I've got information brochures that touch on everything I talked about in the back. My card is back there with my office number, and if you're not from McLeod County, I can put you in contact with your points of contact with your county's representatives as necessary. So don't hesitate to give us a call. I appreciate your attention, and at this point, that concludes my brief, and Nancy's going to be next.
Nancy has special slides, so we need to get those to them.
I also developed a cold before today, so I brought my deep, sexy voice instead of my normal, boring voice. So if you can't hear me in the back, let me know, and I'll try to remember to turn on the microphone so you can hear me, okay? I'm Nancy Ellefson. I'm the apartment manager at Orchard Estates, which is an independent senior housing complex here in Glencoe. And I haven't done this before. Okay. In McLeod County, we're very fortunate to have a wide variety of housing options for seniors. Can you see? You see? Okay. There are individually owned homes, there are townhomes and condominiums, apartments, independent apartment complex, senior apartments, assisted living, memory care, and nursing homes. How many of you live in your own homes? How many of you live in a condo or a townhome? Just a few people. Okay, this is a younger group than was here this morning. So there are all similarities in all kinds of housing. They all provide shelter, they provide comfort, they provide activities, and they provide a sense of belonging. This is your castle, and this is where you belong. There are several differences, though, among all the different housing options for seniors. Individually owned homes, those of you who have your own homes, you know that you're responsible for the maintenance, the yard outdoor maintenance. If I were home right now, I'd be cutting my lawn. I know if you spend a lot of time shoveling or removing snow this past winter, you're responsible for the indoor maintenance. You know, if your toilet breaks, refrigerator quits, you're responsible for doing that. You're responsible for getting from where you are to where you want to go. You're responsible for your own transportation. And your sense of community can be your church, the people you run into at the grocery store, your neighbors in your neighborhood. Oops, I think I've forgotten to change it. All right, your townhomes and condominiums, your outdoor maintenance is done by someone else, so you don't have to go out in the middle of a snowstorm to blow the snow. Indoor maintenance is still your own. You still need to be able to get from one place to another, and your sense of community can be the people who are in your association with you. Apartments, there's no outdoor maintenance, and the indoor maintenance is provided by the building management. And that can be timely or not, that's entirely up to the management. Transportation is still on your own, and the neighbors in your apartment complex can provide a sense of community, but they don't always have a place for to gather unless it's on the front steps. Independent senior communities provide outdoor maintenance for you, indoor maintenance for you. They provide commons areas for you to gather with your neighbors, and the other amenities that are specific to that community. Some communities have exercise rooms, some have movie theaters, some have bar areas with liquor cabinets and card tables, computer rooms, so that all depends upon what kind of facility you're looking at. Assisted living is a package of service that is provided to you at a place where you live. So there's usually two components to assisted living. There's your rent, which covers your board, it covers the physical area that you live in. The assisted living, the package of services includes things like meals, your medication reminders, your medication setups, maybe personal cares, other skilled nursing cares that you may need. Many residents who currently live in assisted living facilities would have many years ago lived in nursing homes. We know people who said that they just couldn't take care of themselves anymore, so they went to the nursing home. Now they can go to independent senior communities and receive some of the services. They can move into assisted living communities and receive services that they would have received at long-term care or nursing homes. Then there is also memory care facilities, and those are specifically designed for people with memory loss, dementia, Alzheimer's. Typically, it's a secure building with 24-hour staffing, and the activities are specifically geared to people who have memory loss. In fact, I just read something today that says that Acumen is making, building memory care units now that have decorations, decor from the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the old refrigerators, the old wringer washers, to bring people back to when they were younger and where their memories are now. I thought that was pretty interesting. Nursing homes provide long-term skilled nursing care, and they also provide short-term rehabilitation care for people who have had joint replacements, knee replacements, have fallen, have injured themselves, need to build up their strength so that they're able to go home again. Their services also include the meals, activities, laundry, medical care, and personal cares. Home care is another option for seniors and other people too. It's the services are provided in your home, wherever that home may be, whether it's in your home, whether it's an apartment. They will come in and you provide services that you need. You contract with them for whatever services you may want or need. Personal cares, homemaking skills, or skilled nursing care. Now, independent senior community is what Orchard Estates is, and I'm going to talk about Orchard Estates because that's what I know best. We do have 40 private apartments. Each apartment has a full-size stove and refrigerator, private bathroom, bedroom, and you furnish it with your furniture and your treasures. We have commons areas to gather in. We have dining rooms. We have a TV room where we show movies. We have sitting areas all over the building. We have an outdoor patio and other outdoor areas where people can gather. Can you still hear me? Okay. We are also connected by indoor walkway to Glencoe Regional Health Services, the entire campus. So we have access to the clinic for your doctor's appointments, the hospital so that you can visit people there. You can go have meals in the cafeteria. You can go shopping in the gift shop. We also are attached to the nursing home, so you can attend services in the chapel there, or you can have your hair done in the beauty shop. Orchard Estates has 3 different size 1-bedroom apartments and 2 different size 2-bedroom apartments. I don't know if you can see very well, we have our largest 1-bedroom apartment here and our smallest 2-bedroom apartment shown on the slide. Now the rent includes all your utilities. It includes digital cable TV, light housekeeping, so we have a housekeeper that comes in once a week to clean your bathroom and your kitchen, and they vacuum your traffic areas of the apartment once a month. The laundry facilities, air conditioning, outdoor parking, and maintenance. In addition to your rent, you would be responsible for your phone service, additional cable or internet services. We have emergency pull cords in the bathrooms and in the bedrooms, and those pull cords are connected to the nurse's station at the nursing home. So if you do need medical help during the night, whenever you pull that cord, somebody from their nursing staff will come to assist you. There is a $15 charge for that. Garage space is $40 a month. And then we have several meal options. I have a number of tenants that go down to the hospital cafeteria for their meals, or we do serve the noon meal in our dining room, or an evening tray. We also, we are not assisted living, we are independent living, but we do have additional services available through Connect Care, which is a home health care agency which was formed through a partnership with Glencoe Regional Health Services and Hutchinson Area Health Care. They have a home health aide on site every morning to help with things like bathing, medication reminders, medication setups, cleaning, exercising, laundry. We also have other home care providers who help our tenants if they've had home care providers before they move into Orchard Estates. They are welcome to use them at Orchard Estates. We just encourage all our tenants to use licensed providers for their own protection. Now, deciding when to move out of your own home into another living situation is a hard decision to make. Everybody at Orchard Estates has made that decision, and we all understand what it's like. But there are a few questions you can ask yourself. Are you lonely? Is it hard for you to get out and about? Is taking care of your house and lawn becoming more difficult? Are you eating properly? And are you fearful of being alone during the severe weather at night or when you are ill? And to decide what facility is right for you, ask yourself a few more questions. Do you want to stay in your community where your church is, where your friends are? Or do you want to move closer to your family? How much assistance do you want or need? And what can you afford? There's several different resources for you. Orchard Estates is registered with the Minnesota Department of Health as a housing with services provider. We also use the Code of Ethics from Aging Services of Minnesota. Because we are registered with the Minnesota Department of Health, we are required to complete the Consumer Information Guide to Assisted Living in Minnesota. So when you're looking for housing, ask to see this consumer guide. It will help you compare apples to apples. And of course, word of mouth. Ask your friends, their family members, where they are, what they like about it, what they don't like about it. And always visit. If they have events open to the public, go in and see what the place is like and talk to the people who are there. Orchard Estates is a small, close-knit community where old friends reconnect. We have had friends that have, from confirmation class, they remember each other from confirmation class. They have graduated together. It's a family tradition. We've had at one time 3 sisters living here. We've had 2 brothers living there. We've had a mom, a daughter, and a son-in-law living in an apartment at Orchard Estates. Excuse me. We get along like families, and we care about each other, and sometimes we even get on each other's nerves. We've been around a long time, even though 1991 doesn't seem that long ago. We've had made changes over the years. We've replaced the carpeting, we've painted, we've replaced siding, windows, we've done landscaping. Things that you would do in your own home, we also do at our Orchard Estates. But what remains constant is that our respect for the independence of our tenants, and that we provide courtesy, understanding, and unparalleled service to them. Just a couple of other, couple of interesting facts. Our age range is from 65 to 100. So you can find all levels, all ages of peoples at Orchard Estates. Our average age, however, is 86. So, and one other thing I'd like to remind you of is, please don't wait until the last moment, until there's a crisis, to look into senior housing for yourself, for your parents, your siblings, or whoever. So many times I get calls from a family member saying, Mom's in the hospital, they're going to discharge her, and they say she can't go home and live by herself anymore. Do you have any openings? And I always say, no, I'm sorry, I don't have any openings. I do have a waiting list. So don't wait until the last minute to make some plans. And that's all I've got here, but I do have some handouts I'd like to give you too. One is our Touching Lives newsletter from Glencoe Regional Health Services. It has an article about one of our tenants who lives at Orchard Estates. And I have also will give you some information on the senior linkage line, which is a wonderful, wonderful resource for people who need information on anything related to seniors, whether it's housing, Medicare information, things like that. So please feel free to give them a call. Thank you.
While Pat is getting that ready, oh, look how fast he is ready. Thank you, Pat. Like I mentioned before, my name is Brenda Hornick, and I've been with Funeral Home doing pre-planning of funerals for the past about 13 years, since 1998. And I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. My husband and I, 10 years ago, did our planning. And I thought, well, that's done. I'm glad. We talked everything over, recorded everything, set money aside. I didn't have to worry about it. He didn't have to worry about it. Neither did the kids. 5 years ago, he died. And so things change in your life all the time. You know, it can be an unexpected death, very sudden. It can be an illness. He had cancer. But things are always evolving and changing in our lives. How many of you have been following, I heard somebody say Joplin, Missouri. Who was talking about that earlier? Over here. Yeah, how many of you have been watching the tornado situation in Joplin, Missouri? Did you see the scene with the convenience store where they were in there and they were screaming, they were in the cooler? My niece was in that cooler. And so I've been following it very, very closely. She's 20, okay? Well, when she got up Sunday morning, I'm sure she didn't think that today might be the last day of her life. She didn't die, but it was within seconds. So things can change very, very quickly. Death is not unexpected. We all have to face that at some point. And so what I'm here to talk about is to give you the tools. Mike was mentioning tools. Give you the tools to help you help your family on the worst day of their life. So you can provide information and things for them so that your planning is all in place and they don't have to worry about it. Funeral planning is not about dying. It's about the gift you give your family so they can go on living knowing that they have done what you wanted them to do. How many besides myself and Pat have our planning done? Completely done. 3. Okay. So we have some work to do. That's good. That's good. All is not lost. We're going to talk about planning tonight. I'm going to talk about a few other things here too. Death away from home, one of the things I'm going to talk about. The benefits of planning. And then the planning guide, which I have here with me tonight too. This is one of the most important tools that I'm going to talk about here tonight. It's called the planning guide. And the key points of planning. And then I'm going to conclude with a right way, wrong way of doing things, especially in Minnesota. Death away from home. How many of you travel? Okay, and when I say travel, I don't mean going to Europe or going down south every winter. What I mean is, do you get in your car and go 100 miles or more away from your home at any point? Probably everybody. Okay. So death away from home. We do that for holidays, we do it for business, we do it for vacations, we do it for leisure. Maybe there's a cabin up north or something like that. Friends and relatives out of state. All kinds of things we travel for. So if you should die away from home, it can be very devastating to the person taking care of those arrangements, right? And so there's a program, it's called the Travel Protection Plan. And it covers either cremation or a traditional service. And someone this morning mentioned, well, I'm just going to be cremated, so I don't need that. It covers a traditional or a cremation service. And it takes care of expenses at the point where, the place where you died. Say you're out of state or even way up north. Place where you died. Maybe you're in another country. So that will get you from point A back here to your home funeral home. It's a worldwide benefit, a lifetime coverage. The cost of it is $385 once. Covers you anywhere in the world you travel for life. Funeral planning, some of the benefits. The biggest benefit that I know of is you're taking that burden and that doubt away from your family. So they're not wondering, I wonder what mom would have done. You know, so many times I have heard people say after the fact, it's like, I didn't know mom's favorite flower was a yellow rose. Maybe there was some notes that were found later. I didn't know her favorite song that she wanted was the old Rugged Cross. And now it's done, and we can't go back and do it again. Can't go back and do it again. So you remove that doubt and that burden because they're not trying to figure out, what do we do now? How many of you have been in that spot? Making those arrangements when someone has died? Tom has? Anyone else? Yeah, Linda? It's all the further I can see the name, sorry. But, you know, that happened with me and my family too. My mom died in a car accident when she was 56. Even though there's 8 kids in my family, there was 3 of us girls who ended up getting stuck, and I call it getting stuck, with doing those arrangements. My dad was a basket case. And so me and my 2 older sisters were the ones that had to take care of everything. I was 28 years old. I don't think that's fair to put on a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old or a 40 or 50-year-old. You know, we know it's going to happen, so we can prepare for it. We can help them through that awful time in their life when they're facing emotion and loss and grief and distress. And I think, didn't you mention earlier things that happened with your family? And if you could share a little later, I'm going to maybe ask you, okay? But it also takes the disagreements away, because there's many families that disagree, either on the flowers, the music, the scripture, the casket, the vault, the day of the service, the time. I mean, little things that when you think about it, think back on it, they're very trivial. But you can take all that away from your family and give them a gift instead of planning. You can personalize your service. Now, people say, what do you mean personalize it? How many of you have gone for instance, to a military service? Maybe the casket was draped with the flag, maybe his uniform was displayed there, some memorabilia of the service. That's a personalization. I remember one, the gentleman was 90 years old, he was a farmer all his life, and at the visitation, they had him in his bib overalls, and they had a milk can sitting there, and a bale, and a pitchfork, and his boots, and you know, it was like everybody that came in there, it's like, oh yeah, that's Joe, of course they would do this. And it just made everybody more at ease, and it was personal to him and to his family. And things like that you can plan ahead of time. One story that I'm reminded of about a family, this lady was married and she had one child and one granddaughter. And she had cancer. And so she came to me and she said, and this was like the late summer of the year, and she said, I want to do some planning, but she goes, I don't want to fuss, I don't want anything done, I don't want a service, just cremation and nothing else. I said, all right, we can help you out with that. And so a few months later, she was getting sicker, and she had more time to think about the end of her life and end of life issues and how it would affect her family. And she called me and said, can I change something? And I said, well, of course you can. So she came in, she goes, well, maybe I'll just have a little service. Just a memorial service, but no pictures. I don't want any pictures. And so I said, okay, that's fine. We planned for that. And again, it got closer to Christmas, and she called me again, and she was, of course, not improving. And she said, can I make some additions and things to my service? And I said, of course you can. So she came in once more, and she said, I'm going to have a luncheon, because people come from a distance, and I think that it would be nice if they had a lunch, but I want jelly beans on the table. And everybody knew that jelly beans were her favorite. And so there were jelly beans on the table. She died in the spring the following year, and there was a visitation, there was a memorial service, there was jelly beans on the table. Yes, her husband put flowers out, and he said, she's going to kill me. But he did that because it was a personalization for him, and kind of made him feel good seeing those pictures of her there. Her granddaughter also did a dove release at the cemetery. And so her family came up and gave me the biggest hug, and they said, thank you for helping us through this time and making this such a memorable event. So it's kind of things like that, you know, because you probably have gone to 100 funerals and maybe remember one of them that stuck out in your mind as something that got personalized like that. But by doing it ahead of time, you know, you make better decisions. You can talk with a clear head. You're not emotionally distraught. You're not grieving. And to make decisions at that point, you know, when my husband died, and we knew it was coming, he had cancer, we knew it was coming, every death is still unexpected. Because we didn't expect it at that time. Because we were at the doctor 6 days before he died, and he said 3 to 6 months. And it was 6 days. So it was unexpected that way. But I thought I was making some good decisions at that time, and thank goodness we had all our planning done, everything recorded, money set aside. When it came time to make the arrangements, my kids were at the house, and I told my daughter that she could go with, or actually she took me in, and my son stayed at the house because it was Sunday and we had a lot of company. And I said, there's nothing to do except decide when and what's for lunch. That's about all we had to decide. To me, that was a huge burden off me and the kids. So we had time then to spend with each other, with family and friends, and not worry about all the decisions and the questions that are asked at the time. And many times you save money, because I have seen people choose caskets when nothing was planned ahead of time, and it probably wouldn't have been what they would have planned if they had done it ahead of time. And so then they are thinking afterwards, why did we spend that much on a casket when that's not what Mom wanted anyway? But they thought that was the last thing that they could do for her. But the last thing that you could do for your family is to have this planning guide, complete the book, do your planning, and then live your life. Funeral planning is not about dying. So you have full control. You have control of the options, of the merchandise selected, of the type of service, everything involved with that funeral service. You can change your mind if you want to use a different funeral home. People don't stay in the same area. Now, I was born in Hutchinson, lived in Hutchinson, married in Hutchinson, raised my kids in Hutchinson. You know, but a lot of people don't do that. I still live in Hutchinson. But a lot of people don't do that. Some people travel around, state to state or different areas. And so sometimes circumstances say, well, we need to use a different funeral home, and that's fine. It's totally transferable. One of the key points too is when you do set up a funeral fund, if there are money left over, it goes back to your family. Unless you are in that 5-year window look back period, and that comes up almost with every conversation here of the speakers tonight. If you're in that time frame and you die within that 5-year look back period and there's money left over after the funeral, the county has the right to ask for that excess back. So again, I want to mention this planning guide. This is our gift to you. It is not in your packets, okay? The reason it's not in your packets is because these are expensive. We do have to order them, and these are for our clients, and I want to make sure to share these with each and every one of you. Make sure you get it. But properly completed, it will save your family time, money, and hardship. Which brings up another story. A couple had gone down south for the winter, and while they were there, the husband died. They had done their planning. They had done their planning with me a couple years before that, and they had the planning guides. And they had the foresight to complete these books, okay? Because if they're not completed, they're not going to do anybody any good. So they had completed the books. Dad was now gone. Mom was totally distressed. Called the son, who lives here in Minnesota, and said, we've got our planning done. You have to go find this booklet and take it to the funeral home. It's got all the information in. He had no clue what she was talking about because they never mentioned it to their family. So when you do your planning and you fill out this book, share it with your family. Share your choices with your family. Don't let them have any surprises. But lo and behold, he called me and he goes, I don't know what Mom's talking about. He goes, there's some kind of book or booklet or something. And I said, you know what, I know what she's talking about. And I don't know why your dad told me, but he told me he put it on his desk. And he goes, oh, no. His desk was buried deep with papers. But he found it. He found it right away and he brought it in. He goes, thank goodness we had this information that they had planned ahead for us. So I just want to go through this really quickly here just to kind of tell you what is in this booklet. In the back, there's personal remembrances and a few of your favorite things and interests. It's got a place to record your will, your trust, insurances, your retirement, 401k, investments, where your important papers are kept. Does everyone know where you keep important papers? Yeah, everybody says yes. You know, I met with a lady and she said that same thing. She goes, oh, I know where those all are. She goes, I can lay my hand on them right now. I gave her this booklet and I saw her the next week and she goes, I didn't know where anything was. She goes, I didn't know. She goes, I had to look all over the house. She goes, now I know where it is and it's recorded in the book where it is. So she was very, very thankful that she had the book and could record everything. It also has a place here to write down people that you want your family to notify. How many of you have, I know I have, been in the seat where a relative is dying and you didn't even know it because nobody contacted you, or a friend. I heard a lady had sent a Christmas card to a friend in California and she got it back with a letter from the daughter saying, oh, Mom died 5 months ago. She didn't know. So record in here who you want your family to contact because they might not know all your friends. Relatives they probably know, but maybe not all your friends. It has a place here for your family tree, so you can record all that information as well. Right in the, kind of in the middle of this book though, it says, how do you want to be remembered? What kind of service do you want? You can mark down here type of ceremony, location of that ceremony, visitation, flowers. That one sounds very trivial, doesn't it? What kind of flowers you want? You wouldn't believe how many people argue over that. Or don't know. Or don't know, you know. Where do you want the gathering to be? Sometimes it's at the funeral home, sometimes it's at church. My friend's son, 15-year-old son, died of leukemia, and they had to have the visitation and the service at the school. And I'm sure you guys have heard of that too, just because he was young, there's so many people involved that the church or the funeral home did not hold them. What kind of clothing you want? Jewelry. Do you want it removed or left on? One family I met, and there was a bunch of them, they were coming in to plan for mom, who was in the nursing home, and they brought a granddaughter along. And we got to that section about jewelry, and I said, what do you want done with the jewelry? And one daughter of the lady in the nursing home said, well, we need to take it off because mom said she wanted to give it to this granddaughter. The person in the nursing home had several granddaughters, and the granddaughter there started crying. And I said, what are you feeling right now? She said, I can't take it. She goes, we have to bury her with it because it's not fair. I'm not the only granddaughter. And I said, you know, it's Grandma's wish that you have it. And I said, here's what I would suggest. And I said, you guys can do what you want, but here's the suggestion. I said, take it off, put it away in a safe place, and look at it again in a year or two. Because after it's buried with Grandma, there's no changing. We can't go back and get it. And so, mark it, you know, jewelry. You want it removed or left on? And if you want it removed, who do you want to give it to? If it's not in your will or written down somewhere else, write it in the book. Pallbearers, the type of casket, cemetery property. If you have a memorial marker, headstone, all of that information is in here. Your education, your marital status, military information, and your personal information. But right in the beginning of the book, now I've skipped over a whole bunch of slides here. Okay, right in the beginning of this book is a letter to your family, and I want to read this to you because I think it's really important. It says, to my loved ones, I have prepared this keepsake for you and those I care about. In this planning guide, I have recorded information that I truly hope will eliminate as much grief, anxiety, and expense as possible at my time of passing. As my survivors, you will be faced with the challenge of making many important decisions in a short amount of time. It is my heartfelt intent that this guide assists you and relieves most of the burden and distress associated with planning my funeral. Inside, you will find a brief overview of my life, a listing of those most dear to me, and some of my most precious memories. I pray this information will aid you in the preparation of any obituary, eulogy, or other remembrances, and serve as a record of my family genealogy and history. I have also included wishes for my funeral services, my cemetery preference, and any other information to help you plan the details of my service for your peace of mind as well as my own. By honoring these wishes, thoughts, and memories, you will be able to celebrate our time together, leaving you with unforgettable impression of my life. I have completed this guide as thoroughly and with as much love and foresight as I possibly could. I sincerely hope that honoring these wishes, thoughts, and memories will lessen any burdens you may carry at my time of passing and allow you to celebrate our time together. And I'll tell you, that's exactly what we could do when my husband died, was celebrate our time together, rather than go through all these things at that time when you are totally unable to make the best decisions. And like I said, I thought I was making good decisions, you know, other things that I had to do, but looking back, it's like, wow, my mind was kind of somewhere else at the time. But so this will absolutely help you help your family. And again, the reason it's not in your folder is we want you to be sure to get this, and we have to order those for you. And it requires some guidance to fill it out, which I'll sit down and go through with you as well. But we don't want your family to find it uncompleted like it did for that one family. We want you to have it all done and in place for them. So see me after the program. I'm gonna hand out some survey sheets later. On the bottom of this sheet, there's a place where you can mark if you want that planning guide or not. And I would suggest, definitely suggest doing that. It's one of the most valuable tools you can have. But as far as funeral planning, you can plan without pre-funding or setting money aside. You can do a partial funding if you want and do the rest later. But there is a plan for everyone. If you don't have a plan, your family will get stuck like we did, making that plan for you. But the best advice I can give you here tonight, you've heard a lot of good speakers, you've heard a lot of good important information. Take those things you've learned here tonight and apply them to your life. Take the things that you need and use them. And I hope everyone does that. Because you can do something now. You guys can talk about it. You know, you can discuss things rather than someone doing it alone later. I have never heard or had anyone come up to me at the funeral home, at visitation, or anywhere and says, man, I wish Dad wouldn't have pre-planned. It made it way too easy. Never heard that. But on the other hand, I have heard just the opposite. If only I had known. I wish I would have known. I didn't. So it costs you nothing to set up your file, and you are moving dollars, not spending them. They're still your dollars. You're just putting them from one pocket to the other one in a safe place. The fund that we use is a funeral insurance that grows with interest. It's protected from the nursing home. You can change your plans at any time, as the lady did I was telling you about. And you guys are the only ones who can put this information in your family's hands, so that they will have it at a time when they will really need it. And after you're done with that, you know what? Give yourself a big pat on the back and congratulations, because you have just done one of the best things that you can for them. Now, I mentioned I was going to talk about right way and wrong way of doing things. In Minnesota, specifically, there's a right way to set up a funeral fund. There's also many wrong ways, which I'll touch on later too. But the right way to do it, so that it is protected from medical assistance, it is protected from the nursing home. The county requires 4 things specifically, okay? You have to have a written contract with the funeral home. Number 2 is you need a statement of funeral goods and services. And what that is, it is a sheet breaking down every single cost of items that you select, okay? So it's an itemization of all your choices. You must have an irrevocable aspect to it. And the 4th thing, the beneficiary says any funeral home with the contingent, contingent being your estate, okay? Those are the 4 things the county looks for when setting up a funeral fund, and you go to them and apply for that medical assistance. These plans are transferable, like I mentioned before. You don't have to make it irrevocable today. I said it has to have an irrevocable aspect to it. It does at the time you apply for medical assistance. If you don't want to set that up irrevocable today, it can be revocable. It can be changed later. Now, for the guys only, I'm going to talk to the guys. 2/3 of the time, or up to 80% of the time, it's the woman who's walking through the door that I'm meeting with, that she's either making the funeral plans or making the pre-planning. And why do you think that is? We had several comments this morning. Why do you think that is? Men die first. Any other feelings? Men die first. You're right, 80% of the time. And Lord knows I didn't think I'd be walking in those shoes when I was 52 years old. But Who knew? Age has nothing to do with dying. We all die. But 2/3 of the time, the reason she's planning after he dies is because she don't want anybody else to have to go through what she just went through. She wants to have everything done and in place. And I think a spouse's death is probably one of the most devastating things that a person can face, and you agree with me, because you've been there too, haven't you? How many widows in the room? Few of us, okay. And placing a spouse in a nursing home too, that is an extremely difficult situation. I'm sure that some of you have had to make that decision. But you know, all your lives you have provided for each other, you have talked things out, right? You guys make decisions, you guys are married, I'm taking it. You make decisions and you have the same last name, and you're sitting close together. You know, but you make decisions all the time, and you always bounce things off each other. Why not the funeral planning too? It would make it so much easier. So much easier. You can do it together now rather than alone later. I think that's a much better option. So for the ladies, again, I'm just reiterating here that you're moving dollars, you're not spending them, you're just moving them to a safe, secure place. And they're going to be used at some point anyway, right? The money in your funeral fund belongs to you. Not to the funeral home, not to the bank, not to anyone else. So you're just moving those dollars. I mentioned the wrong way of setting up a funeral fund, and you know what? We can go through these things 10 times, and there's always somebody that says, but I have this account. Pay on death account. Pat was mentioning, if you can get $1, go get that $1, spend it on your care, and then come back and see us when it's gone. That's a pay on death account. You can, if you can have a withdrawal from that, that's your money, correct? That's the wrong way of setting up a funeral fund. Shared bank accounts. How many of you have a shared bank account with a child? A lot of people do. Okay? So that shared bank account, whose social security number is on that account? Probably yours. Who's making the deposits into the account? Probably you, because your child is not putting money in your account, right? Okay, so every time you do that, that's a gift. Okay? So that's not the right way to set up a funeral fund. Life insurance owned by you. Okay? If you have a cash value in that policy, and Pat mentioned this, if there's a cash value in that policy, it is available money or an available asset for you. You can cash that policy in and take that money out, correct? Life insurance owned by somebody else. Maybe your son is the owner on your policy. What happens if he dies before you? Who becomes the owner of that policy? His wife. And you maybe didn't like her anyway. Now she's cashing in the policy and taking off. Not a good way to set up a funeral fund. So again, what you have learned here today, take all that information, use it to the best of your benefit, and make a commitment to yourself and to your family to do something today. I want to thank you all for coming today, and like I mentioned, the evaluation forms here, I will pass those out. What we use those for is, what we use those for is so that these seminars that we put on, we want to give you the best information possible. We really look forward to your comments on the bottom. Give us your feedback. Tell us what you think you'd like to know in the future, what other topics you'd like to hear. But fill these out completely, and I will pick those up. We'll have a door prize drawing using these also. We got some Glencoe bucks to give away.